Today we are going to be looking at some of the uplifting writing of Edgar Allan Poe.
And darkness and decay and red death have unlimitable dominion over all.
Wow, that's depressing. Let's tone it down a bit.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more."
So the ominous mood is set for one of the most famous poems ever written. Coming from a generation of horror stories like Stephen King, it is very interesting to look back at someone like Edgar Allan Poe, whose writing, while much more subtle than we are used to, is still capable of sending chills down your spine. I want to first look at the structure of The Raven, as it is a very carefully organized poem. The rhyme scheme seen in the first stanza is repeated throughout the poem, as well as the internal rhyme scheme, that is, the rhymes within the same line. It feels impossible not to be swept off by the hypnotic rhythm, which, like a drum beat, slowly builds in speed and intensity until it reaches a fever pitch where you can imagine the speaker yelling at the top of his lungs. Poe does something very interesting on the second, fourth, and fifth lines. Each line ending with the rhyme "or" is one syllable shorter than the other two, and we can clearly see the final line is much shorter than the rest. The result is that when the Raven enters and utters the ominous word "nevermore," it hangs in the reader's mind, emphasizing and exaggerating how this word, repeatedly spoken by the Raven, slowly burrows its way into the speaker's mind, driving him to the brink of insanity. What starts out as a story of a talking raven quickly spirals into a story of a man descending into his own personal hell. I told you this would be cheerful. So not much is happening at the start, just a man sitting alone reading old books. We find out the room is filled with purple silk curtains, velvet-lined chairs, and a library of old, sophisticated books. It is the creepy house in every ghost story, and it seems like the perfect place for someone to sit and brood.
Distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly had I sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore.
So we find out the man is trying to bury his sorrow due to his loss of a love, a woman named Lenore. We don't know who she is or what happened to her. All we know is that this man is desperately trying to relieve the pain of losing her. And we all know the best way to get over a girl is to brood and get all My Chemical Romance about it. He starts to have hallucinations about her perfume filling the room and longingly remembers her ass print on the velvet cushions. Little weird, but we all take heartbreak a little differently.
And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before.
Most of us probably know the feeling of watching a horror movie and having every creak of the house set our nerves on edge. That seems to be what is happening to our speaker here. Then there is a rapping at the door. This could represent a great many things. First off, it is the unknown. It is the introduction of the stranger. The stranger is not a person, but rather a category of experience. It is the introduction of anomaly and uncertainty which shakes up the status quo. The stranger fills us with both hope and dread. He can inspire us, shower us with gifts, or he can kill us. In this case, the tapping at the door appears as a disruption of the serene state within this man's comfortable chamber.
Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer.
So he finally builds up the courage to open the door, only to find
darkness there, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before.
Soon he realizes the tapping is coming from the window, and he tries to comfort himself, saying,
"'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door. Perched upon the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. Perched and sat, and nothing more.
And what do you do when a bird flies into your house? Obviously, you start talking to it, if you're a crazy person.
Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven. ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
It is clear this is no ordinary bird. He calls it a stately raven of the days of yore, and he's clearly approaching it with awe and respect. As you probably know from reading Norse mythology, okay, who are we kidding? As you probably know from the movie Anchorman, the Norse god Odin has two companion ravens named Hugin and Munin, roughly translated to thought and memory, whom Odin gave the power of speech. Just as Hugin and Munin pry beneath the surface of the world in order to bring hidden truth to Odin's ears, so too does our speaker pry into the hidden knowledge he believes the raven to possess. The raven has perched itself atop the bust of Pallas, another name for the Greek goddess Athena, most commonly known as the goddess of wisdom. Even more connection to the raven as a source of knowledge and insight. And there is another mythological reference when he says the night's Plutonian shore. Pluto, who you'll probably know better as Hades, was god of the underworld. A raven, often depicted atop skeletons or scavenging a field of human corpses, seems exactly like the kind of beast that would occupy our nightmares. It also perfectly sets the mood for this dark and brooding poem of a man, alone in his room, or depending on how you look at it, alone in his mind, with nothing to occupy him but his own disturbing thoughts and memories. Now the communication between the man and the raven continues. The questions start simple. He first asks the raven's name. He then asks if on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore.
Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking, what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore.
He keeps posing more and more serious questions to the raven. The man already knows the answer to each question, yet still he holds on hope that the raven will tell him something different. But soon, as he digs deeper, the answers will begin to peck and pry uncomfortably at his mind. He asks if the thing he most longs for, to see his lost Lenore, will ever come to be.
Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet said I, thing of evil, prophet still if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed the hero shore. Desolate yet all undaunted on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted. Tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore.
Is there balm in Gilead is just a fancy pants way of asking if he will ever find relief from his sorrow.
Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore.
The speaker is blaming all his pain and sorrow on the appearance of the raven and shrieks for it to go. But the raven refuses. It is the old adage, wherever you go, there you are. The raven now appears to be a dark fragment within the man's soul and something he is completely incapable of escaping. No matter how hard we may try to banish them, the ravens of our own thoughts and memories will forever remain as our constant companions.
And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.